Okay, let's see the deployment now. Now you can deploy an application in three ways. One is from console, one is from command line, and there is something called a deployment scanner. Now the deployment scanner is something the JBoss keeps monitoring a directory. If you copy any file, it automatically gets deployed, and because we are working on a standalone JVM, so we don't have to really mention anything about the targets or any other JVMs. So the only server that is we are working on is the location where the application gets deployed. Now to get into this one, the folder in which you have to copy is deployments directory. This is where you have to copy it. It's available under standalone. Alright. Now this same directory will not be available under domain directory. So which means deployment scanner is not available in domain mode. It's available only in standalone mode. So all that you have to do is copy your var file into deployments directory and it gets deployed. So currently we don't have anything at this moment. We will copy one of the files and watch the log file, what happens. So this is a very basic way of deploying. So I'm going to do a tailfnf on standalone.log, right? And here we're going to copy a file. Now we have a var file that was created, a static var file. I'm going to deploy that file to this JBoss instance. JBoss, so if you see, so this is the file. Let me first copy this into our JBoss home, then we will copy it into deployments directory. IT students JBoss ITP, so home on code IT students JBoss ITP. So we have our file here. All that you have to do is copy this file into the deployments directory. So I'm going to copy students JBoss ITP JBoss standalone deployment. So this is where we're going to copy it. To copy, this is a file and copy it into the current location. So you have copied. Once you copied, you see this one, this is coming as is deploying. It's getting deployed. Now it's actually complete. Once if you do ls-ltr again, you will see deployed. So the moment you copied the file, JBoss actually created what is called a marker file. This marker file will tell you the status of deployment of this var file. So it created first thing that it is deployed, then the deployment finished, so it has created deployed file. So we know that this var file is deployed by just looking at this file. That's it. Also in the log file you will see that it's actually deployed. See this one, this is what is happening here. Starting the deployment of encodeit.var. Alright, now this file has a clusterable object, means clustering or replication is defined in this file. That's why it is actually starting the cluster service called Infinispan. Then also you'll see that the encodeit.var file is deployed and it's ready. Now that it is deployed, you can actually see it from the console. So let's go to the console. So go to runtime deployments. Under deployments you have this. This is your file. Alright, now once this is deployed, we can actually access this application. See this one. Now we want to access this deployed application. Now when you're accessing the application, this application is not accessible on 9990. It's accessible on the HTTP port, which is 8080, which is defined in the standalone.xml file. So encode IT, this is the context root, This is the actual piece that we have deployed. The encode.it.var file internally has a simple HTML piece. But what we are interested in seeing here is that we were able to deploy a var file and we were able to access the piece in that var file. And also a point to note it is application is accessible on a different port, console is accessible on a different port, and command line is accessible on a different port, which is 9999. Alright, so you have deployed an application by simply doing a copy. Now the reason how it's deployed is the deployment scanner will actually monitor this directory. Whenever you copy this file, it gets deployed. Now the same way to undeploy, all that you have to do is remove this file. So let's remove the deployed file. It automatically gets undeployed. You can see it in this one here. See, unregister web context, then stop deployment of encode this one, then stop blah blah blah, undeployed your application. That status will also be available, undeployed. So to deploy, all that you have to do is copy this var file. To undeploy, simply remove the deployed directory. Now you can actually, even if you remove the var file, it's still okay. So nothing will actually happen. So it's undeployed. So you can remove the undeployed directory also. So deployment is simple copy, undeploy is remove the deployed directory. Or else a much simpler approach is copy the var file, remove the var file. That's also one way of doing deployment. Let's first copy the var file. Copy. This is deployed. Alright, so we can see it here also, deployed. Now I'm going to remove the var file. Let's remove the var file. Automatically it gets undeployed. So this one. Alright, it's just like auto deployment in WebLogic. Alright, you copy a file, it gets deployed. You remove that file, it gets undeployed. But here there is another thing called marker files. This is a new thing in JBoss. So what we have seen is deployment scanner working in automatic mode, means it is actually scanning for the new files in the directory. Now obviously this, when you are working in a production environment, this will result in a performance degradation because the JBoss server is spending its time in monitoring this directory. What we can do is, instead of asking JBoss server to monitor the directory, we can say you don't monitor it. Instead, just look for a file, alright, like this at every frequent intervals, and if you see this file, then deploy it. So instead of simple copy and removal, we are saying I'll copy the file, but it does not mean you have to deploy it. Only when I create this marker file, then only deploy it. Which means we can make the deployment scanner manual in nature. This one. This is not automatic anymore. Automatic is what happened just now. You copy the var file, it gets deployed. You remove it, it gets undeployed. But we don't want the deployment scanner to run it. Instead, we want to depend on a set of marker files. Alright, so the marker files are basically the whatever is the var file, and then it's deployed. You have actually a nice explanation about the marker file in the readme text itself. See here. To undeploy or to disable the manual mode, or to disable the automatic mode, you have to actually change the deployment scanner in standalone.xml file. You have to add these two additional things. Means you're saying automatic deployment of zipped content is false is what you have to say. The same way automatic deployment exploded content is false. So you're basically saying do not deploy automatically. I will say something, then only deploy. Now what we're going to say, we're going to add do deploy, then it will basically deploy it. So first thing I'm going to do is quickly I'm going to disable it first. So how I'm going to disable it, I will open standalone.xml file, search for the deployment scanner and this thing, add these two values with false. So let me do it on another screen here. So here you're expected to do all these things when the server is down. So make sure you bring down your server. Key-95295. So let's open the XML file, standalone configuration vi standalone.xml. Now let's search for the deployment scanner. Deployment scanner is what you're searching. So / here, this is one, that's what not we want. Click on N next. This is what we are subsystem. There are only two. Okay, this is what we are looking for, deployment scanner. You can actually do a grep and then go there. So this one, grep deployment scanner from standalone.xml. So you see this thing, this is what you're actually searching for. So let me do a vi on deployment scanners, standalone.xml, search for deployment scanner, vi standalone.xml deployment scanner. Looks like we're messing up the file. Take a backup anyway. So copy standalone.xml standalone.xml.pkp1 -pkp1. So I've taken a backup. Now open the file, deployment scanner. This is so deployment scanner. I'm going to just add these things. Scan interval is already there, I think. Yeah, the scan interval is already there. So to the end of this, I'm going to add it. I'm going to add auto deploy zip and auto deploy exploded content to the end of this one. So here, let's insert it. Auto deploy zipped content, it is true, we're going to make it false. So we are saying do not auto deploy zipped content. Zipped content is nothing but the var file. The same way auto deploy exploded content is also false. So once you save it, close it, you basically disable the automatic deployment using deployment scanner. Now let's start the server. Start standalone. Now if you copy the var file into this directory, it will not get deployed automatically. So let's copy it now and see if it gets deployed or not. Earlier it did. So let's copy pw copy and code var into current directory. See, nothing is, the dot deployed directory is not getting, file is not getting created. Let's see what happened here. It said deployment scanner. It found that encode_it.var file is there in deployment directory, but it did not deploy. What is it saying is to trigger the deployment, please create a file called the var file name .ddeploy. So all that you have to do is create this file. So how do you create a file? You just touch it. Touch will create a 0 bytes file. It's an empty file. So you created it. Now that you have created it, it's getting deployed. See this one. Now it's deployed. See this. See. This is where it was earlier. It was saying create a file. Now it started deploying of encode.it.var file. Alright. Then it basically went on and deployed. Alright. The same way to undeploy it, all that you have to do is remove the do deploy file. Remove that deployed file. Remove this file. Remove this file. It gets deployed, undeployed. That's it. So this still it is a deployment scanner, but in manual mode. Earlier, deployment scanner was in automated. Means we don't have to put the file called deploy. Now the file names are also different. Remember, this is do deploy, which means it is a do deploy, which means please deploy the application. So this is manual mode of deployment scanner. Now this is a popular way of deploying the applications. Another way is obviously an easier way where you can use your web console to do the deployment. So let's see if we can do a quick deployment using that one. So load the space. So nothing is deployed here at this point of time. So we are in here. So runtime, we are at server, manage deployments, add application, choose an application. Now you have to choose it from your desktop. So here I want to choose the encode.it.var file. I think it's on the desktop. The same var file. It's not there. Let's copy it onto our system. So this is a file. Let's copy it to the desktop. Okay, copy. Now let's choose a file. This is the var file. Open it. So you're good to deploy. Move on to next. It's request. This will generate a key. You don't have to worry about it. Save it. So once this is deployed on console, you need to activate. This is an additional step you will have. So select it, enable it. That's what you call activating. Enable it. Once it's enabled, so it's basically enabled. Now you are able to see the same application. So refresh it, you'll be able to see it. So you have deployed it using console also. The same way you can actually deploy it using the command line also. At this point the command, not sure about the syntax, so we'll see it sometime later. The command that will come in your mid-cell somewhere, so make sure you simply remember that command in case if it's asked in interviews. So you have now you know how to deploy an application. Now the next thing is database. JDBC. This is one area where some of the questions may come out. So we'll see how to create a data source. Now the data source creation is done in 2 simple steps. Whereas in WebLogic, if you see the data source creation is a pretty simple step. Means you go to console and then